screen. I'm going to go ahead and do it. So if people are listening, that's just us trying to make sure it's working, guys. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Kgabo, Africa. This is Chris once again, coming to you from central Pennsylvania. Wherever you find yourself, it's Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, New Zealand, out in Oz in Australia, UK, Germany, Canada, and of course in Africa, in Nigeria, Liberia, Ghana, Botswana, Dumela, Botswana, Sawubona, South Africa. Hey. Oh, my guest is already jumping in there. I haven't even got him on the screen yet. So let me do a quick introduction of my guest today. And looks like, I don't know if we got anybody watching because the stream restarted or something. But let me just double check here before everybody disappears on us here. Folks, be patient there. My guest, those who are watching, just hang on. I'm just trying to double check to make sure we're actually going. I've got some phantom stuff happening here. And I'm really not sure why the phantom stuff is happening. So just a moment of patience. I appreciate your patience. And we'll see if I'm actually online here. It says I am, but I'm not buying it. I see someone else decide to go online right now too. This is interesting how this time frame is usually free. I'm the only one using it. Suddenly other people are jumping in there. Let me see. Just a moment, folks. Please be patient. Double checking here. And it's taking longer than it should to confirm that I actually have this happening. And this says that, in fact, I am live. So for those who are there, my apologies for taking so long to make sure I was live here. Come on. A little faster. There we go. All right. Okay. So that says, he's giving me a Joe Biden ad. Oh, my goodness. Now we are going to fall. Now we are going to fall asleep. Okay. Hang on. Okay. It's over. All right. There we go. Finally, I can see myself. All right. Now we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kgabo Africa channel. This is Chris once again. Hadrian, Yanni's there, Wayne, Nigel, Wesley, Slotsteenkamp. Good to see you guys. Thanks for tuning in, and my apologies for the rough start here. Streamlabs didn't want to start the connect to YouTube for some reason, so I want to make sure we actually had the correct stream and not a broken stream, kind of back like when the red ants used to cut my line all the time. Those of you who were with me early on remember those agonizing days. But welcome into the channel, folks. I'm going to bring my guest in just a moment here. He's a young man from South Africa. He's a Tswana speaker. It's his first language. He also speaks Afrikaans and English. And we'll bring him in just a moment. His name is Odin Moja, and he's mixing a drink. I can hear it in the background. So Odin is going to come in just a moment here. And we're going to talk about his experiences in South Africa, a little bit about Tswana culture. And it should be interesting. He's a computer programmer, currently a PhD candidate, and he's working, he'll explain that a little bit better. It's about medical data and something or like that. So he's going to explain a little bit better when we talk about that. But he's a military history buff, and he's also an aviation buff. Those are interesting fields to have an interest in. So, folks, with no further delay, I'm going to bring in our guest. And this is our guest, Odin Moja. Odin, what's the Hillijang?
Colonel.
All right, good. So, I'm Kitsihili Sandle. So, for those that don't speak Tswana, we're just greeting each other. Welcome to the program today, Odin. It's a pleasure to have you on board.
Cheers.
Oh, cheers to you. Well, I'll have my Starbucks up here, so just a moment. I was told that apparently that is sponsored or owned by what's his name, George Soros, but that's not true.
Yeah, as we say in the Northwest, Kimanati Hubiang mo.
All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit more than the introduction I gave to folks.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess originally, how far back do we want to start this?
Not in the year 1652, because apparently that's when Jan van Riebeck got to South Africa. So let's start a little more recently, your history.
Well, there's 1652, and in America there's 1619. So apparently the 1600s were just terrible. Like that's where the Garden of Eden was destroyed.
Apparently.
Okay, so for my background, I grew up, born and raised partially in Pretoria, and then I went to school in Joburg, as you can probably hear from my Joburg schoolboy accent when I speak English. But I always loved Pretoria. I actually wanted to be an Air Force pilot, but as it turns out, you need to not have bad eyes to do that. So I decided to just become a computer programmer. And the rest is history. And then eventually I moved back to Pretoria. No offense to anyone from Joburg, I just don't want to live there. And,
well, we're gonna get toasted for that one.
There's more Tswana speakers in Pretoria anyway. I'm more comfortable that way. It's exactly. Just it's nicer. And so then I moved back here and been working in software companies ever since. And then one day I decided to start a podcast after seeing Ernst, Conscious Caracals podcast. And mine was meant to focus on tech, but then it just kind of morphed into this thing where it's just like tech, politics, memes, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much my background. And of course, my political background is I'm pretty much a sort of right-leaning libertarian type. Yeah, that's about the long and short of it.
Odin, listen, I think you missed the memo. Did you miss the memo? I don't mean to surprise you with this fact, but I think that you might be black. Did you miss that part about being right?
Yeah, apparently I got that memo just a little bit too late. So, you know.
No, we joke, of course, but there are stereotypes about people, and everybody assumes that every black South African has died in wool ANC supporter or a leftist, and simply not the case. And there's a lot of South Africans from all ethnicities that back different parties. So I think it's always, we say it tongue in cheek, but it's kind of, I think, important to break that stereotype that not everybody supports one particular party or another. So I didn't know. I feel kind of like you cheated me here. I didn't know you had a podcast. I don't remember ever talking about you having a podcast. Now I haven't promoted your podcast. I almost feel guilty, but since you didn't tell me, I don't feel guilty at all.
Nah, that's on me. That's on... I try not to make a big deal about it, but it's an entertaining enough podcast. It's called The No Script Show, and I'm happy to share details with you, you know, after the podcast or after this live stream about it, and we can have a good chat about it.
All right, folks, there you go. So what we'll do is we'll put the link up to it so you can get Odin's podcast and check it out. And I think you said no scripture, which I guess cuts two ways. It could be coding, or it could also be something related to the Bible.
That is well, more or less. It was actually meant as a joke in that it's a coding related thing, but it's also related to just not exactly biblical, but sort of off the cuff, whatever, sit around, internet water cooler. You get to talk about whatever you want with the boys, and it's fun.
Is there any way you could shift about 2 centimeters to your left? That light behind you is shining through the side of your head. No, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm backwards.
Sorry. Yeah.
The direction. There you go. Or you got the wrong left. There you go. That's perfect. Yeah. Well, camera a little bit higher. Either you got to go higher or you got to sit lower, because now the top of your head's cut off.
That better.
Oh, you're going to have a sore back by the end of this. All right.
Nah,
all right,
I'm good.
So let's get into it. So you grew up, and I would imagine your first language was Tswana. That's the first language you grew up speaking around the family, yes?
Well, yeah, Moja is to Setswana surnames what I don't know, what's a really British sounding surname?
Smith, Jones?
Haversmith or something.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to get fancy? You're going to get posh on me. Okay, gotcha.
I mean, look, I was born and raised in Pretoria, sort of, but, you know, my grandmother's sister still lives in Bots in Kgabo, and my grandmother lives here. But, yeah, we still have family on both sides of the border.
Okay, cool. Well, actually, that's important. I'm sure a lot of people in Northwest and maybe even in Gauteng are familiar with the fact that Tswana people and the differences between Botswana and South Africa. So just let me share this, and you correct me if I get it wrong. So, of course, you got about 4 million first language Tswana speakers. About 2.6 million of them live in South Africa, and the rest, by and large, live in Botswana. And in Botswana, they call the language Setswana, whereas in South Africa, people refer to it as Tswana. But it's essentially the same language in almost every respect. And there are many subgroupings of these two different, or this particular tribe. I don't like the term tribe, but this particular ethnic group. And it's interesting because some of the clans are on both sides of the border. You've got the Bangmanwato on both sides of the border. You've got the Bakwena. You've got the Bangwaketsi on both sides. So which group are you from?
I'm from the Bakhatla group. I've actually got my clan totem here with me.
Oh, sweet. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Our clan totem is Kgabo,
okay,
which is obviously meaning monkey, but more specifically vervet monkey. Very weird thing I know in this politically charged moment in time, it's very weird to come out as a black person and say, actually, this is my clan totem in terms of racism and referring to black people as monkeys. But in this specific context, it's okay.
No, in your house, it's okay, but I suspect on my shelf, it would be considered white privilege or something like that. Yeah.
Well, no. I don't know. We'll get a pass written out for you. But yeah, you're right about that. I mean, it's ironic because there are almost twice as many Setswana speakers in South Africa as they are in Botswana, which is a weird situation. I checked the last census thing, and there was a lot more of us here apparently than there are in Botswana.
No, absolutely. It's fascinating too, the history of Botswana. So it's interesting you still have family there. I've been hoping to get a bigger base in Botswana, but I think a lot of people are kind of bummed out with the lockdown, then the not lockdown, then the lockdown again, then the not lockdown. In Gaborone, it's been a roller coaster ride. They got locked down because the authorities overreacted to 12 folks turning up positive at one of the hospitals. Well, actually, if you're going to get positive people, that's probably where you're going to find out about it at a hospital. I'm just saying. But they shut the city down for another 2 days, the capital. Then they reopen it. Got to be frustrating for folks back in Gaborone, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, my grandmother's sister, she's not actually in Gaborone itself, just sort of on the outskirts, but she was, locked down pretty tightly. And it's weird to me, like you mentioned, where you say if you're going to find positive cases in a hospital, it's a basic scientific concept. When you start looking for a thing, you are going to find that thing. So when people are like, oh, we did this many tests and so many more people turn up positive, I'm like, yes, that's what we were looking for.
No, but in fact, the world's politicians are running around acting as if they're Stanley looking for Livingston. That was a lot harder than finding COVID-19. It's easy to find COVID-19. You just have to look for it.
Nice reference there. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about. So you grew up in which town or around where, if you don't mind sharing? You grew up in Northwest.
Well, partially in the Northwest, Mahikeng type place, but a lot in Pretoria and Johannesburg.
Okay. So did they take you back out on weekends in the summertime, to be near a cattle post or something, so you had your heritage? Or
well, it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because it's something that my mother was sort of really quite adamant on, that when we grow up, I'm sure you're no stranger to this, but we know certain cultural practices, like, I mean, our farmers in the Northwest. So, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Tswana concept of mpetwa.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like your I guess your age group, your cohort.
Cohort, yeah.
Yeah, so that's for those listening. It's basically it's on a cultural concept where, especially for the guys, these are the men you grow up with, learn to do everything with, if necessary, go to war with, or whatever. And in a sort of modern context, my brother and my cousin and my cousins are that cohort of mine. And basically, we were taught from an early age, even though we didn't need to know how to do it, things like how to slaughter this type of animal and, the processes behind lobola negotiations and that kind of stuff, for nothing other than the value of cultural preservation. And even, as I said, knowing which specific subgroup of Tswana we come from, or rather Botswana that we come from, because it's just important to preserve that cultural heritage.
No, absolutely. I think it really is important. It's what makes us different. It's what makes us interesting in many respects. And the effort, I think, today by people around the world to, pardon the phrase, to whitewash or to eliminate the differences and pretend we're all androgynous, there's no difference in gender, and we're all the same, and tear this down and tear that down, that really doesn't celebrate our differences. And it's interesting to see people talk about diversity who are out trying to erase diversity. It's actually kind of bizarre in some respects.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm actually I left it in storage, but I actually wanted for this podcast stream to wear my haka. That I'm sure you've seen it before. That sort of very specific, various blue and white patterns that we wear, especially at weddings and things like that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Well, actually, what I'm wearing today is not a rugby jersey, but a rugby shirt. I'll stand up so people can see it. From the Toronto Wolfpack. These guys have a club up there in Toronto, and I think they were trying to actually become, they were looking to try to join Major League Rugby, but I don't know if they really got that far along. But let me do a little bit of housekeeping real quick, Odin, just to say hello to some folks here. I don't see any questions yet. Looks like people are just listening to hear. Sloat's here, Wesley, Nigel, Wayne, Yanni, Drian, Anton, the usual suspects here. We're all looking for Kaiser Sose. We still haven't found him with the usual suspects. But on Hollywood reference there, okay, clearly Odin's not a big Hollywood fan. Anne-Marie Jenkins. St. Nigel's there. Tian Lezan is here. Lezan, Brian. Marius Krukamp, Linda Smith. I know I saw. There's Hendo. Good to see you, Hendo. Oh, you'll be back later. Okay. Pete Buttons. Christian Perdago. Sorry, I get his name. It's Portuguese. I have a hard time with Portuguese. You know what's funny, Odin, is that I had never been to Portugal, and people said, oh, it's a Romance language, and of course I knew that. And then I went to Portugal. I'm like, this isn't a Romance language. It's like listening to Czech or Slovak, man. This is a rough language.
Don't let my friend Quinton hear that. I see Conscious Caracal is in the stream.
Oh, he is. I haven't seen him for a while. He must have a slow day.
Just dropping in.
Okay, good to see you, Conscious Caracal. Okay, good to see you there. Linda and Smith and Linda Kriesel. Linda and I, neither one of us can pronounce her surname because it's German, but she's married to an Afrikaner, and so they mispronounce the G. Oh, here comes the hate mail. Hang on there, Odin. Okay. Dion Desfart. Oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I did have a conversation with Major General Johan. Hang on, let me make sure I get this right because I know they're going to have fun with this if I don't get it right. Where's my notes? I made a note here just so I don't mess it up. Johan Josta. Okay, I think that's correct for Afrikaans now instead of saying used because they were giving me a hard time on that one. And the Dodgy Idealist is here along with Dion and Jason. Good to see you all. All right, guys, let's get back to Odin because he's the guest, and if we'll talk about what's going on. So you grew up. How did you learn Afrikaans? Where did that come about?
Basically from being in Pretoria and, obviously having a lot of, it's an Afrikaans city. So, having a lot of Afrikaans friends, that's just how it happens, Yeah.
And then English, I assume because of school, you learn English in school. Is that
course,
where that came
yeah.
out? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, most of South Africa, you can get by with all three of those languages pretty well. So that kind of covers the ground for you.
I mean, especially for someone like me in the Northwest and in Gauteng and in Pretoria, it's just, it's I don't need to know any other languages.
Absolutely. What do you mean someone like you, a computer programmer?
No, I just mean someone who lives in this, a brown person. No, I'm playing. Can I say that on this podcast? I don't know. It's.
You can on my channel, but if we get demonetized or defunded or deplatformed, I'll let you know with another platform.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. So, it's just where I live, those languages are fine. It's funny you mentioned that because if I were to visit Bots now, Tswana in South Africa has sort of started to diverge from Tswana spoken in Botswana. And for example, how can I illustrate? Okay, so if I was to say the sentence, Koloi waka, which is, my car, to somebody in Botswana, they would instantly pick up that I'm from South Africa because of the word that I used for car. Because Tswana here has sort of, I don't want to use the word polluted or diluted, but has sort of merged a little bit. It's sort of concurrent with a little bit of Afrikaans and Sotho sort of influences, and that's sort of, so that's, I mean, they're not indistinguishable, but it's detectable if you speak Tswana in Botswana as opposed to here.
No, absolutely. And it's actually the same with English, I would say, too. For those who speak English in Botswana, which is virtually everyone except for out in the bush, some people don't. But the English spoken in Botswana is a merger between Commonwealth and American English. It's kind of weird. So I have conversations with Botswana when I'm there and in English, and they'll say things that are American euphemisms and American colloquialisms, and they'll use American nouns, and then suddenly there's a South African or English word that's in there. So you don't hear people in Botswana say robot. They don't say that. They talk about a traffic light. That's what they say, just like Americans, just as an example. So it's funny how borders will artificially create separation in language, even amongst a similar culture or same culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, the other thing for me is that from a cultural and language perspective, I almost feel like when I'm in the Northwest that I'm basically already in Botswana based on the people that are there and the language and everything there. It's, especially the closer you get to the border, it really becomes noticeable that I feel like I'm basically already in Botswana.
Yeah, no doubt. So do you get around in Botswana? Have you ever been anywhere beyond the Gaborone area? Have you been up to Maun or to Kasane or Francistown, somewhere like that?
It's been a couple of years since we visited. Pretty much Gaborone, Francistown. I don't remember going beyond that though.
Oh, you got to get there. One day you got to get up there to Moan and check out the Okavango. It's definitely one of those bucket list things. I'm telling you. I've been there so many times. It's amazing. You won't regret it. Trust me. So,
Okay.
so how did you? I mean, listen. Okay. How do you wind up in computer programming? I know you want to be a pilot, but people want to be president too. Those are big dreams, and they don't work out. But I mean, pilot and computer programming. That's not exactly a small switch. I mean, you use computers on planes, but I mean, come on. Were you like a gamer or something like that, or did you just really find it cool, or what?
Honestly, yes. Like I was a gamer, and the other thing is my mom was expecting me to become an accountant.
Oh,
And
dear
she's
God.
she's let go of that silly military dream. Just be an accountant or a lawyer like your dad or me. And I was like, nope, nope. So I enjoyed video games so much that I started to take them apart, or rather, I started to take computers apart.
I'm
and
sure your
help.
parents appreciated that.
Yeah, yeah, appreciate is let's go with that word. So I started to take them apart to learn and build custom machines, and I got so into it, and I was like, you know what? It would be great to be able to write my own computer game, which to this day I have never done, but at least I learned how to code.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, listen. Back in the day, and this really showing age. I mean, back when I was writing code, many eons before light was invented. Before electricity and all that stuff. I wrote in BASIC, and then learned a little bit of COBOL and a few other things. Then C came along, and then C plus and C plus plus, and I don't know, is it C and 27 pluses and Visual or something like that now? What do you code in these days?
Okay, well, actually, it's funny you mentioned BASIC because Microsoft took BASIC and evolved it to sort of Visual Basic, and that's the first language I learned to code in. A lot of kids these days, undergraduates, are now intentionally learning COBOL to get jobs at banks and big firms because a lot of those backbone systems are written in COBOL, and the structure of it is such that imagine if you want to rewrite it or redo it, these systems can only be down for a fraction of a second. And so they need to be solid, reliable. So it's very hard to rewrite or re-engineer these systems. So you basically now have these generations of people that are coming in, they're like 20 years old, and they know how to write in an ancient language because the banks just need people to keep those systems going. For me, I learned Visual Basic, and then at the moment, I code in C#.net mainly. I'm mainly a back-end sort of application programmer and integration programmer. So to put that in perspective to any of your viewers, this pretty stuff that you see on the web, all these websites, the interfaces on your phone, that's not me. The programming I do is the information that this stuff sends back to the web server, or if you go to, I don't know, an insurance company and they do a quote for you, I'm the guy that wrote the code that calculates the quoting engine. That's my aptitude when it comes to coding.
Well, I just thought I'd clarify for some of our viewers. I know we just had a spike in viewers, and it came immediately after you started talking about rear end and back end. This is not Pornhub, folks. We're talking about software coding, just so that's clear, okay? Don't want to attract the wrong audience here. I'm just saying. So Jason asked the question, Odin. He says, "Do you play Call of Duty or Call of Duty Warzone?"
I have actually played it, but I'm terrible at it at the moment. I tweeted it out on my show's my Battle.net tag on the show's Twitter account, but I will tweet it out again when you can find me at WotanZA. I do play that. I'm terrible at it. I play, in terms of first-person shooters, more Overwatch. But yeah, I do play a bit of that. And at the moment, I'm playing a lot of classic Red Alert again because they just remade that. So why not play it again? I'm more of an RTS sort of gamer.
Yeah, no, that's the kind of thing I was always into. So, I mean, the gaming thing, the biggest thing is back, I remember in the late 90s, mid-late 1990s, when I was at Fort Leavenworth, I was at my command and Combined Arms Services Staff School. And we were in the officers' billets, and our class finished early most days. So we went back and we set up an intranet inside of the building using the phone lines, and we played Diablo online with like dozens of people. It was just awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. That was the one. That's the classic. Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. So yeah, Vihan. Speaking of referencing back then, Vihan says that Chris is so good he coded when there wasn't electricity. So. Yeah. Okay. And I do notice that you called BASIC an ancient operating system. So moving right along. Pascal. Yeah, I remember Pascal. Somebody saw about Pascal.
I see somebody started on 8080 assembler.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but Nigel really is ancient. He's, he's like 97 years old, so we should,
I mean, respect the veterans. So, shout out to Nigel.
Nigel, what was it like in the aftermath of the Boer War? Did you guys have a hard time then as a child? Well, I'm just kidding, Nigel. Just giving you a hard time.
Yeah.
So listen, Croy Thompson, who is over on this side of the world, asked a question. What's Odin's perspective on the tech scene in South Africa in terms of investment flows and the innovations that's applicable to South Africa and sub-Saharan Africa? Wow, that's a good question and a loaded one.
Yeah. Tech scene, perspective on the tech scene. I don't know precisely what he means by that. But I'm gonna take my assumptions on what he means by that. If you mean what it's like to work,
yeah, what's it like? What's your view? What do you think of it?
Well, I'm gonna take that to mean what does it feel like to work in that industry, and also what my opinion is on the hope for South Africa's tech scene. So for what it's like to work in the industry, it's a bit of hit and miss. I'm not gonna say any names, but I know some companies that I've worked for and some friends have worked for that. You get a great salary, but by the end of the day, you want to walk into your gun vaults and put your Smith & Wesson in your mouth and end it all.
God.
Well, I just said Smith & Wesson because that's my actual everyday sidearm, but whatever. So there are some terrible companies to work for.
Wait a second. You're a really confused individual here. You didn't get the memo. You're a gun owner. What's going on here, Odin?
I'm a member of GOSA as well.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, total race traitor. So there are some companies that are terrible to work for, even if you get like a great sort of salary. My hope for South African tech is that it's probably the best industry we got going because mining's probably fucked thanks to ANC rule. But tech is a lot harder to regulate in many ways. So I think it's probably South Africa's best hope. And I think that the best hope, especially for a lot of kids in townships, and things like that, is actually to get into tech because it allows you to break out of South Africa's sort of borders in ways you couldn't normally do. What assumptions, investment flows and innovations that's applicable to RSA and SA as sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, investment flows. In terms of cash, I presume. I despise Cape Town, but I think that there's a lot of good tech companies in Cape Town that should be getting a lot more money. And in terms of in terms of innovations, I think that the best way to go. Yeah. In terms of innovations, I think the specific technologies that would be best in terms of South Africa would be the best technology. Probably any sort of messaging app because with that emphasizes security because our government is becoming increasingly sort of authoritarian, even more so than commies normally are. So any sort of messaging apps with technology and any sort of payment app technology, that's my guess for where South African tech would most benefit.
Yeah, no, again, I'm going to have to point out, I think you're confused, Odin. Look, the ANC is simply trying to right the wrongs of the past. They're not communists. They're not socialists. This is just about, balancing things out, my friend. Come on, brother. Catch up with the program. We're going to have to get you a new menu. Anyway, but seriously. Yeah, yikes. Yeah, no, I think it's true. I think that tech probably is a place where South Africa should go. I mean, one thing that's nice about the tech industry is that you can't carry a lot of fat. You can't carry people with a matrix score of 30 in maths. That ain't going to work because you're not going to make any money. So you hire talented people, and hopefully you get somewhere. I mean, that's what it's kind of like the military. We can't have dead wood leading, otherwise we have tragic results. And in the tech industry, if you want to stay ahead, you've got to innovate, you've got to create, and in order to do that, you have to have talented people. Or am I missing the mark there?
Absolutely. It's difficult to hide a bad programmer for very long because no, it's true. A good dev team can carry a bad programmer, but sooner or later it's going to become increasingly obvious that they're not a good programmer.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask this question from your perspective. For a coder, does coding require creativity? Do you have to have some kind of creativity? Because artists have creativity when they paint, and musicians have creativity to write lyrics for songs. But when you write code, you've got to have some kind of vision in your mind, don't you, of where it's going to go and how it all ties together?
I would say it's 80% sort of pure mathematical, logical ways of breaking down problems or envisioning architecture in your mind, and then about 20% creativity.
Oh, that's so disappointing. All that math. No wonder I stopped programming.
I'm not that good at math either. It's just,
No,
I was good enough to pass like math 1 and 2 in varsity. I was good enough to get passed through that the first couple of years of varsity math, and yeah.
It's strange though, isn't it, Odin? Because I mean, my math skills are kind of dodgy, but I know a lot about investing, and I've been very successful in investing. It's funny when you may not have the skills to do certain things, but when it comes to math, things you really want, you can learn that stuff. It works out.
Yeah, it's incredible. I've actually, honestly, in terms of maths that I learned in varsity, I've probably, only used any sort of real varsity math once or twice in any program, and I've been programming for good like 7 years. So yeah.
So it's working out so far without it.
Yeah.
Now, you were saying earlier about English and Afrikaans and Tswana is that it's kind of nice because in the area you live in, really that's the languages you need to survive for the most part. And people ask me, they say, what do I like? Because when they ask me, we should cover this. You kind of said something about Cape Town, and I'll come back to that in a second. But people ask me, what's my favorite part of South Africa? And I say Pretoria. And except for people around Pretoria, they're like, huh?
Yeah.
What are you drinking?
Yeah.
Man? What's wrong with you? Do you get bounced on your head a lot as a small infant or something like that? No, but for me, one of the reasons I like the geographic terrain. I love the Mahalisburg, which are very close by, and you've got people around there who are friendly of all ethnicities, and you can speak those 3 languages, at least enough of it that people are considerate and polite to you. And it's just a beautiful area, and I like the seasons and everything. Now, you said something like you don't like Cape Town. Why don't you like Cape Town?
Because I'm a Wali and I hate those damn Capies.
Okay. Are you?
No, I don't actually hate Cape Town. It's just it's a pure like
Vaal
Highveld versus Cape Town rivalry thing. It's like you live in New Jersey. You don't actually hate people in New York. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. I've been to New York. I know why people hate people in New York.
Yeah, no, Jersey doesn't get, and vice versa. No, but you're right. That's just kind of that rivalry sort of thing. So, but are you into rugby or any sports or no?
Yeah, so obviously, very painfully, I support the Bulls because I'm from Pretoria all day, every day. And soccer. So there's this very weird dichotomy because my brother and I have this endless thing. There's Wayne ZA screaming province. You have no idea how much, as a Blue Bulls supporter, I hate hearing the words province screamed out.
So do you go into DTs or something when you hear somebody say VP? Does that bother you?
It does. It's like, no, I hate that team so much. Oddly enough, my brother was also born in Pretoria in the same damn hospital, and he ended up as a Sharks supporter. How, I do not know, but
I think he was oxygen deprived at an early stage.
It's probably. I mean, yeah. I'm the firstborn. Maybe our folks put a bit more effort in me. It's just
all the resources went to Odin.
All right. So yeah, and my brother supports the Sharks. I support Kaizer Chiefs as a football team. He supports Pirates for some reason. Yeah. I also am very much into American football. To my detriment, I'm a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan. My brother is a Philly Eagles fan, and our cousin, for whatever reason, is a New England Patriots fan, which just drives me insane.
Well, that's
So
just
yeah,
wrong. It's just wrong.
right?
That's the Patriots are like the biggest cheaters on the planet. I mean, every
Thank
time
you.
you turn around, they cheat.
Thank
Oh,
you. I mean,
gosh.
can we do something about Bill Belichick? Can there be justice in this world?
Apparently not. Or what about pretty boy Tom Brady and his arrogant wife, who says she's all proud of being Brazilian? The woman's whiter than I am. Her name is Gisela. Giselle Bündchen. She's Gisela Bündchen.
Yeah.
Her German ancestors or Nazi ancestors, whichever they were, fled down there to Brazil. Man, come on, get with the program.
Yeah,
here.
I was going to say, if you're from South America and you have a name like that, you might want to check your grandpa's closet.
Exactly. There might be a few skeletons that are hanging in there.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
but well, that's so. Do you ever get over to Loftus to watch a game since you're a Bulls fan?
Yeah, I've sat in the US Pavilion once,
Ooh,
the East Pavilion. That's
yeah.
the rougher part of the
I
Loftus.
know. That's why I'm going. Ooh.
I have not sat there again. Usually I sit anywhere but there. No offense to anyone that sits there. It's just pretty rough there. And yeah.
Yeah. No. Tian says, "Hey, listen. At least the Bulls haven't lost in 3 months. It's the best season they've had ever." Well, come on. The Bulls were pretty darn good just about a decade ago. They were just rolling over Super Rugby and Curry Cup. Yeah, no, it's now we get Sharks fans
Good
coming
times.
too.
Those were the good times.
Yeah, no doubt they were. The salad days, to say the least. Yep.
I see got some Sharks supporters in the chat as well. It's a bit disappointing, but I understand.
Well, it's okay. Jason's saying Transvaal, but Jason, I think the Transvaal team went away a long time ago, my friend. They became the Bulls.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Sins of the father fallacy. What are you talking about, Christian? Okay. Oh yeah, Pete Buttons told me that I'm a boomer like him. So we fossils when it comes to being hip. Well, here's the problem with that, Pete. Technically, I am a boomer, but I'm also Gen X because the baby boom ended on December 31st of 1964, and I was born on Christmas Day, just a few days before the baby boom officially ended and the next generation started. So technically, I've always been counted by different demographic counters as either a baby boomer or Gen X. So when you talk about baby boomers today, people are thinking of people who are octogenarians. Well, yeah, that's the leading edge of the baby boomer. On the tail end here, some of us are still dead, sexy, and young. Come on, stick with the program.
Good retort. Good retort. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, well, Northern Transvaal was the Bulls. I think that was what they used to be called, Northern Transvaal. Yeah, so you're right, Jason. Make that distinction. Sorry. Pete Button says Africa is fun. Hey, so speaking of Africa, Odin, have you had a chance to travel anywhere in Africa? Have you been outside of South Africa at some point?
Yeah, so I've ticked off basically everywhere in Southern Africa except Namibia.
Seriously? Wow.
At some point in my life, I've been to pretty much every country in Southern Africa except Namibia.
Well, what was the highlight? I mean, for me, it was always going to the e-commerce capital of Africa, Eswatini. That's kind of a cool place to go.
Yeah, I forgot they changed their name now. That was a brief holiday when we were kids with my mom. That one I was like, sort of ambivalent about. I did enjoy oddly enough, going to Zim a while ago, a long time ago. I enjoyed going to Zim. And Lesotho as well. I liked Lesotho the least because it was freezing cold. And I know it's nothing compared to like Michigan in the middle of the winter, but it was cold enough for me.
No, I got you. It's funny because when I live in Southern Africa and I see people bundled up and I'm walking around with shorts on, look at me like you're crazy. But it's all a matter of perspective. When I lived in Liberia and the temperature is usually in the 90s, so that's over 30 degrees Celsius. The humidity is like 95% every day. So you're basically soaking wet all the time. And then the temperature in the rainy season drops into the 70s, so down to about 18 degrees Celsius. And it rains, and so it feels a lot colder. But of course, I walked around in shorts all the time, and I'd walk up to my apartment where I had a guard outside, and he wore, like, no kidding, an Alaska parka with a fur-lined hood, and he's standing there with his teeth clattering, going, "Sir, aren't you cold?" Like, dude, this
sounds about right for the course.
I'm like, dude, this is heaven. I've been melting in this place for 7 months. I can finally breathe.
Sounds about right for the course. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So where did you get to? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I see Nigel mentioned something about Flight Simulator 2020. I might go into that. I know it's not accurate flight simulation, but I'm really into the Ace Combat series of video games. Yeah, it's just fun to fly around and shoot stuff up, or shoot stuff down.
Cool. Jason was asking how cold and hot it gets where this place is. This is a temperate environment, so we get into the mid to high 30s in the summertime with some high humidity for a few days or a few weeks. And then in the wintertime, you get down to get to zero and go below zero. Sometimes we get snow here, so it's a temperate environment. It's nice. I like temperate. I like the seasons. I'm not a fan of the seasons never changing, so that's just not really my thing. I lived in Monterey, California when I went to the Defense Language Institute, and it's almost the same year round, and it's kind of boring. I like to see the leaves change. I like to see the weather change. So, all right. So let's get back to the computer stuff. So you're working on your PhD, and can you tell us what that PhD is in?
Well, my current areas of interest are medical informatics and artificial intelligence. I haven't really declared anything major yet, still sort of bobbing around, but my real research interests are in terms of things like information seeking behavior and safety mechanisms. For example, if you could build a system that could detect somebody has a certain medical history, and because obviously pharmacists have to prescribe you certain drugs, but they don't know everything, even if you honestly tell them. So it's a sort of safety detection system like that could help you sort of not give drugs that are bad for the person without knowing it. But also in terms of preventative medicine, they're doing really great stuff in terms of AI and object recognition, especially with things like cancer detection and breast cancer detection. I've seen some really amazing stuff, because what people don't realize is that even really great radiologists take a long time and sometimes miss certain details that could help with early detection. But the rate at which sort of AI solutions promise to be able to chew through detection instances and the ability, because as it turns out, our caveman eyes aren't that good at very fine details. So the AI object recognition can sort of really detect even the tiniest sort of blips there that could help, because when it comes to certain diseases, like the earlier the better.
Yeah, no, I just that is fascinating stuff, and you're right. Radiologists do miss things. Humans make errors, and it does happen. Sometimes it can be tragic. So anything that can help improve that is usually really good stuff. So I want to miss this. Wayne ZA said that he doesn't believe this because he was born on Christmas Day in '66. That's actually funny.
Jeez.
Yeah. No, it's funny because until I was 45 years old, I'd never had a conversation with someone where they said, "Hey, oh, my birthday's on Christmas Day too, on the 24th, on the 26th." But I'd never, I mean, obviously millions of people are born. It's a different day on the calendar. But, I always see people like, hey, my birthday's May 7th. Hey, so's mine. I'm like, nobody ever says their birthday's Christmas Day. But that is the case. So what led you to that? I mean, what kind of got you headed down that path?
That specific type of computer science, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, honestly, cryptography and sort of security stuff has just way too much math for me to like. And I'm just being honest. And AI is just it's fun. There's so many more applications to it that we can do with AI. For example, in terms of, let's say, smart cities and routing, you could build a sort of genetic algorithm that sort of churns in information from sort of GPS routes of delivery trucks. And over time, you could evolve that route information through a genetic algorithm and start coming up with the most optimized route for those delivery trucks to take on any given day. And it would probably be something that nobody would ever guess. And that's like what I really love about the power of AI is it has the ability to take in so many other extra factors that are just there's too many factors for the human mind to wrap itself around at any given time. It has the ability to give us so many more insights and like I said, with the routing algorithm, vastly enhanced something as basic as that, which could lead to less accidents, safer delivery times, quicker and more efficient delivery times, which you could then pass on as savings down the line to your consumers. So if you're delivering these things and they're really efficiently delivered, you could pass those savings down the line to your consumers. Now, for your middle class and upper middle class, that does make a difference, but a couple of cents. I mean, my family's been. I mean, I live in a nice place now, but my family's also been dirt poor, so I understand the value of just that couple of cents of savings in basic perishable items. So for me, that's what interests me about AI is the ability to just enhance just about anything you can put your mind to.
But is it not a valid concern to be scared about things like Skynet?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so this is actually where my beef with Elon Musk came from, is that initially
you've got a beef with Elon Musk. Okay, other than his smoking a weed on a radio, I don't have many problems with it. But go ahead, I'm curious. What's your beef with Elon Musk?
Not anymore, but he was initially what I call, first of all, he's a physicist, not a computer scientist.
That's correct.
Okay, so my problem with him was the halo effect, is that when a celebrity, especially someone like him that has sort of science knowledge, says something is bad, then people take that as gospel. For example, I will never mention anything about CRISPR because it's not my field of science. And that's something you start to learn as you become a scientist, is that you don't know shit. Okay? You know a lot about a very tiny, narrow aspect. So yes, Elon Musk was right to raise concerns about AI. We all were. But when we started dropping atom bombs, initially, we didn't even know that we wouldn't ignite the atmosphere. So yes, there are, and yes, AI is an existential threat to humanity, but so are nuclear weapons because we only have one Earth. And so they're both existential threats to humanity. My beef is that he sort of, and he's smart enough to know better, he sort of sensationalized how much we should fear it to the point where people were hysterical about fear of AI. And again, I want to reiterate, we have every reason to be worried about it. It's an existential threat. But that we can't turn the sand back into glass. It's out there. You know, our best option is to develop it very carefully, because even if every country in the world, and Chris, I know you'll probably agree with this, even if every country in the world said we're going to stop developing it, somebody's going to keep developing it, no matter how much they say we're going to stop. So when it comes to AI, my general warning would be this, is I subscribe to the Isaac Arthur school of thought when it comes to AI, which is keep it simple, keep it dumb, or else you end up under Skynet's thumb. And the meaning of that is that we can, in terms of AIs, we can make specific AIs, and people don't understand that it's actually possible to limit an AI. I'm not going to go into the math of it, but let's say your vacuum cleaner doesn't need to have artificial general intelligence. It just needs to have the ability to have good object recognition and learn on that. But it doesn't need to. You can engineer it in such a way that it can never gain certain abilities. So what we need to understand is that, one, we can engineer it to limit it in certain ways, and two, even if we do need artificial general intelligence in case somebody else does use it, there are certain fail-safes that we can start putting in place. And yeah, I actually wrote a whole chunk of it in one of my papers, but yeah, that's something we can get into at a later point.
Yeah, no. I watched all those Stargate Atlantis episodes with the replicators. That's pretty scary stuff. Mm-hmm. No, but seriously. So I'm confused, Odin. You were talking about, Elon Musk and creating hysteria over AI and getting people all excited. It's a real threat, but are you talking about AI or COVID-19? I'm a little confused.
Oh, wow. I really love how that's just taken over everything these days.
Well, not here in America, because apparently it's been cured, because now you can destroy cities and burn and loot, and there's no danger of catching this mysterious ailment called COVID-19.
Okay, so, what I thought was particularly interesting, even before everybody came out, Ron DeSantis in Florida, governor, he caught a lot of flack for wanting to open up. I believe the governor of Georgia also got a lot of flack for wanting to open up. Nobody bothered to check what the measures they wanted in place were for opening up.
Exactly.
And as you'll know, there's a lot of parts of places in outside of the sort of Atlanta metro. There's a lot of places in Georgia that are pretty rural and distant.
Virtually the entire state outside of Atlanta.
Yeah. And what I found particularly interesting was that Jared Polis, I believe, or Polis of Colorado, the governor of Colorado, he also wanted to open up, and he got zero flack for that. And I think the governor of Maine also wanted to open up, and basically all the governors that had a D next to their name were just like the media just didn't give two craps about that. They're just like, oh, it's fine, just ignore that, it's fine. Like I'm like, guys, I'm willing to accept that you're worried about, opening up. But for me to believe that, you need to cover this fairly. You need to cover that these governors with a D next to their names are also opening up. It's like Andrew Cuomo is sort of the hero of the republic, but Andrew Cuomo also put a order through that had COVID positive nursing patients sent back to those nursing homes. And nobody's given him flack for that. And again, I'm willing to buy that the media wants you to be worried about COVID-19, but I'm going to need to see them cover it fairly instead of having things cut in one way all the time.
Well, there's little chance of that happening in the mainstream media or the newspapers and magazines and such. It's just not going to happen. So, for instance, you're talking about Cuomo. Cuomo in 2015 decided not to spend $559 million buying ventilators for the next, pandemic and crisis. Now, this, of course, was prompted because of the Ebola outbreak and the hysteria over Ebola in the States, where he had virtually no cases of it. And so, as a consequence, states geared up their disaster response and preparedness. And Cuomo denied purchasing $559 million worth of respirators. So instead, he spent over nearly $800 million on a solar panel photovoltaic factory near Buffalo, New York, which is bankrupt. All the money's gone. It's been looted. It's almost like an ANC project. It was so successfully failure. Anyway, so then, of course, he attacks Donald Trump for not giving him respirators. Well, the federal government doesn't sit around with respirators to give to states just because. That's a state responsibility. But the press doesn't lambaste Cuomo for his abject failure in not buying 40,000 respirators that he should have bought when his legislature gave it to him. But yeah, that's exactly right. Let's catch a few of the comments over here, and then I want to shift gears about military history real quick, Odin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. So someone's gone very gothic. I don't know. Is that me or Elon or is it my shirt? Pete's proud to be a boomer. Hendo says Elon's a deep state frontman. Of course, Christian Perdago says he's laughing at that. Let's see. Christoph says, will you download your consciousness in the computer like Sheldon Cooper?
Big Bang Theory. That's a philosophical question in that if it's ever really you that's in that machine. But I would consider it. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Just to see it. Yeah, I'm glad you, by the way, mentioned the COVID-19 thing, because again, the other thing that annoys me is that people polarize us into this. Either you totally don't care and it's all a hoax and whatever, or you just go overboard with like we're all gonna die if we. I think that my stance is yes, it is real, but also there are different sort of risk profiles for different populations and different countries, and to treat everything in a sort of blanket manner is at best inefficient and at worst the height of madness.
Well, yeah. So for clarity, and those who pay close attention, I'm sure know my position on this. It's a dangerous virus. It's highly infectious by all indications we have of it. But this is potentially the greatest political hoax of the 21st century, the reaction to it and what's happening. You don't react to something like this by shutting the world down. You protect the vulnerable. You protect the people with the underlying conditions, and that's how you go about it. But instead, we've decided to destroy the world, and then people can't make money and can't feed their families and get sick on top of it. Not a wise approach. Even now, after 7 months, almost 8 months of this now going on, because you got to go back to China where it started, we've had a few 100,000 people with their deaths attributed to this. Many of them actually didn't die from the virus. Here in the U.S., they got people who they don't even test. Suspected because they had a respiratory problem. Yeah, he had stage 4 metastatic lung cancer, and he was 97 years old. That's when he came into hospital. So you can't just assume he had COVID-19. So a few 100,000 people have died from it or attributed to it. But last year, 620,000 people died from malaria. 800,000 people die from suicide around the world. 900,000 die from HIV/AIDS around the world. And 1.5 million people died from tuberculosis last year. And tuberculosis is similar. It's highly infectious, and it comes from proximity, and it's very dangerous. But we're not losing our minds over those things. Really, really frustrating. So that's kind of where I sit on it.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Christoph Havanga asked a really good question here, which I already was going to bring up, but I'll use it as this question. He says, so what do you think about a soul? You can download your consciousness into a computer potentially, but what happens to the soul if the soul's a real thing? And I think that's
Well,
where
I was
going
going
to
to
don't know
say
if it's really you or not. I think that was your point.
That's the thing. First of all, the question assumes somebody's belief in a soul. Obviously, if you come from a religious background, then yes, you do believe in a soul. My thing is with anything to do with transferring yourself into a computer, soul or consciousness or otherwise. Let's say we have the technology to transfer soul. We still don't solve the continuity problem. It's a I don't remember the exact philosophical name for it, but it basically states that you have no continuity from when you're shut down in one place to powered up in another. You have no way of guaranteeing beyond a shadow of a doubt that the you that went down is the you that came back up. You just have to believe the observers. And it's actually a similar thing to it's a slightly scary thing that if you think about it, it's the same thing when you go to sleep. You have absolutely no way to guarantee that the you that went to sleep is the you that wakes up. Like you don't know. Your consciousness stopped at a point and you don't know. So yeah,
this is getting a little too Nietzsche for me. So we're going to shift gears. But listen, be nice in the chat, folks. People talking about trolls. Actually, you've missed it entirely. Look behind me. What do you see up there? There's a troll. There's another troll. Probably kind of far off. You can't see it with my screen not on the full side. But I noticed a lot of really, really nasty comments in some of previous videos, which moderators had caught and YouTube had caught. And I went through and cleaned those up. Things that were being held for review today. And was kind of astounded at the juvenile behavior of some people. So yesterday I put the trolls up there. Since the trolls are ever present, they're actually on my bookshelf behind me there. But let's
shift. This is the internet, man.
Yeah, exactly. Let's shift gears real quick. Okay, so we're coming up on an hour. Can you go longer, or you got a hot date, or?
Nah, I got time.
All right.
I don't know. If you want to talk some military history
let's
or
talk
whatever.
Some military history. Now, you did watch my Gettysburg video, correct?
I haven't watched through the whole of it, but I appreciate some of the walking you did there.
Okay, cool beans. I thought you watched. I feel so sad. I thought you'd watched all of it. Anyway, no, but seriously, no, but you're a military history buff. So what you and I were talking, and I mentioned Southwest Africa, German Southwest Africa, the First World War, and then Tanganyika. What sort of military history do you find most fascinating, and maybe do you understand why you find it fascinating?
Okay, well, I know a lot of people have all these endless sort of how do I put it? Alternate history takes on the Second World War, but honestly, I find the First World War far, far more interesting, just because of all the sort of European monarchies that it was the birth of the modern age, because out of it, a lot of monarchies died, empires were shattered, it reshaped the Western Europe, and even if you were in the colonies over here, you were not sort of untouched by it. My most being Tswana. My most interesting battle in the Second World War, I'll say, is Monte Cassino, and I'll get into that in a second. But the First World War, it was the clash of 18th century tactics and thinking against 19th century mechanized warfare and weapons. I mean, at the start of the war, the border clashes, you had the French, who had the best, probably the best. Sort of continental army at the moment, going up against the Germans, and you read these accounts and you have their officers. I mean, they went in there still looking not much different from their original army military uniform that Napoleon had, and you have these officers standing up in the middle of whittling machine gun fire, because that's just the way you stand as an officer, and it's just so incredibly stupid to do that. But that was 18th century thinking, against 19th century sort of machine guns. It's incredible.
No, absolutely. It's I think from a historian standpoint, the First World War is infinitely more fascinating because of all the transitions in weaponry, the arrival of modern warfare, essentially, which is what you're getting at. Now, I know that people always like to take pictures and show pictures of the Polish cavalry charging German tanks in 1939 in a futile effort. Okay, that's because Poland didn't fund its military very well, not because they couldn't have tanks. But at the beginning of World War One, there were no tanks and there were no aircraft flying, in combat. And you didn't have machine guns fielded. We had Maxim guns and things like that, and the Gatling gun, but the actual things that changed warfare. And then, of course, the use of chemical weapons in the First World War. The list goes on and on. Submarines were used in the first time in an effective and large presence. We used them in the Civil War, but they weren't really particularly effective. And so you see all of this coming to the fore in the First World War. And also, which a lot of people miss this, people don't know African history particularly well, the First World War was full of Africans, not only with conflict in Africa, primarily the biggest piece being in Tanganyika, where the Commonwealth and Jan Christian Smuts were chasing Paul Letto von Voorbeck around fruitlessly for 4 years as he eluded them and embarrassed them, tied down 500,000 Commonwealth troops that were needed in Western Europe. But in Western Europe, if you go through the cemeteries, you find lots of West African, you find lots of North African graves of soldiers from Africa who died fighting for France and for the UK against the Central Powers. It's a fascinating period of history.
Yeah. Honestly, for me, it is quite fascinating. Even things like where you see with the Germans, that's where they started pioneering things like the concept of stormtroopers, where you have the best of your best. These sort of, you see these old photos, and they sort of look like these tall German wild men with long blonde hair, and they were given extra rations and all that, and they were the best of the best with all sorts of weapons, and they were the ones that started pioneering things like infiltration tactics, where, especially at battles like Verdun, which I would not wish Verdun on my worst enemy. Verdun and the Somme, I would not wish on my worst enemy. That to me would be hell. Verdun, the Somme, or Passchendaele. In fact, I believe there's an old English poem where the guy wrote, "I died in hell, but you called it Passchendaele," or something like that. And it was just, where to me, one of it was a revolution at the time, but where German commanders would have them sort of these artillery barrages, these creeping barrages, and they would have the stormtroopers sitting right behind that barrage. And as soon as it lifts, they just rush right in. And you with military history would know things like infiltration tactics and things like that are just common sense now, but it was revolutionary then.
No, absolutely. In fact, Rommel became famous because he wrote a book on tactics from the First World War, from his experience. And my one of my first battalion commander when I was a lieutenant in Germany, he was an instructor, a West Point instructor, and he wrote a book about Rommel's and his First World War experiences. Quite a interesting thing. This is back to something earlier, but it was too funny. I want to miss it. Defender Dev said that AI was bent on taking over the world, but then got stuck reading Facebook posts. I would just add to that. I think that AI was bent on taking over the world, but it got trapped in an if-then loop on Twitter. And so it was a Twitter, feed. Anyway, but So, what other military history is there? Any other parts of First World War? Did you follow Tanganyika or Southwest Africa at all, or is that something you know about, or no?
Not as much as I followed sort of the Austrian campaigns, because I just thought it was funny what an absolutely useless ally the Austrians were to the Germans.
And they also drugged them into the war.
Yeah, and the Austrians, sort of the battles there. It was this. I can't remember the name of the podcast. Oh, Hardcore History, where they were talking about how to this day even recently they're finding frozen Austrian or whatever soldiers in the mountainous regions there from the battles they fought there. And I just thought that is absolutely insane. That is insane. And also, I'm more in terms of the First World War, sort of the Brusilov offensive. That to me is also just seeing how utterly unprepared the Russians were is just unbelievable.
Oh no, absolutely. And then the Russians were eventually knocked out, and of course that really started the collapse of empires, of monarchies, and that was going with the Russians going first. But yeah, no, it is fascinating. And I lived in Italy, just below the Dolomites, which is where you're talking about, where these battles took place between the Italians and the Austro-Hungarian armies. And there's Commonwealth graveyard there, where some British troops were sent down to reinforce the Italians at some point because they were collapsing against the Austrian attacks. But yeah, you're right. There's still find bodies up on glaciers in the Dolomites, Austrian, Italian soldiers. In fact, Austrians were the most recent ones found. So it's not just Ötzi, the traveler crossing the Alps that they found buried in a glacier, about 20 years ago. It's also soldiers. But there's a fascinating one. And now that I know you're interested in that history, maybe I can point this book out. I don't have the title of it off the top of my head, but it's written by a Army War College graduate, and I think he might have taught here briefly years ago. But he wrote a book on the campaign in Romania and Bulgaria that took place in the First World War, which is fascinating. It's really well written. It's not boring, and it's almost something you can read cover to cover. It's just that engrossing. And it covers all of the history and the battles. And what's interesting for me is I've actually been to those sites because I did a backpacking trip through Romania and Transylvania, and these Austrian troops and German troops marched right down, and there was a lot of Germans involved in this because the Austrians weren't pulling it off. But it's fascinating. So they go into Bulgaria and they go into all over Romania. It's just really interesting stuff. So I'll get the name of that book. I think it's not called Blitzkrieg, but something like that, because this was kind of like a forerunner to the German Blitzkrieg style of warfare in the Second World War.
Right.
And Rommel studied this stuff, what happened in Romania, and that's what kind of contributed to it. So interesting. People are asking what the name of the troll is. The troll doesn't have a name. Unlike my therapy Hemsbach, this is Wilbur. He does have a name. So my trolls don't have a name yet. So if you guys want to name the troll, you can throw a super chat and we'll consider it.
Yeah.
No, but seriously.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else we got over here? So.
So that was, but I mean, I think the Germans lost it after the spring offensive. People say they could have kept going, but after that point, I think, guys, you outran your supply lines. You had great sort of strategic acumen, but you had no real tactic. I mean, they were committing men to wiping out skeleton forces of allies that were holding worthless train intersections. I mean, it was weird, but I mean, after that, I think the war was over for the Germans after the spring offensive. So yeah.
Well, and in fact, it wasn't just the spring offensive. Exhausting their military power. They also political power was exhausted. They were facing dissension and anger domestically back in Berlin and around the country. People were rising up and very angry about the war still continuing because of food shortages and deprivation and things like that. So it was all kind of falling apart for them at that stage. And of course, I think the nail in the coffin was America entering the war. Once America entered the war, and we lost over 100 and some thousand soldiers in the First World War. People think we were only in it for 2 or 3 months. No, we were in the war for more than a year. Yeah, we lost a lot of soldiers. So
I mean, look, the Spanish flu in the trenches didn't help, but yeah.
No, that didn't help either. Yeah, in fact, there's a cemetery, Catholic cemetery in Baltimore, where my Irish ancestors, a lot of them are buried. There's one grave marker for 23 of my cousins, aunts, and uncles who died from Spanish influenza from 1918, 1921. Yeah, it was pretty sad. It affected the whole world. So again, Spanish influenza, COVID-19, the world didn't stop for Spanish influenza, and that was a hell of a lot more dangerous. Not to get too far back into COVID-19, but people are running around like this is the Black Plague and it's 1349. Well, 75 million people haven't died from this, it hasn't stopped the world on its own. But so let's switch a little more gear here. So aviation. Why aviation? What's interesting about that for you?
It was my dream to be a pilot, and I just think there's just something so fun about the looker. I mean, I got to sit in a Gripen. I was part of the Aeronautics Society in university. I got to sit in the cockpit of a Gripen, and it just felt unbelievable. Obviously, I didn't get to fly it, but they did fly us down in a C-130 down to the Air Force Base in Cape Town. Like, it was a special trip between the various universities and their aeronautics societies, and that just felt amazing to me. And I think obviously I'm a big fan of the U.S. Air Force. I think that the F-15 is probably it deserves a lot of glory, but I think that the A-10 is in terms of ground support is as good as it is, still doesn't get enough props for all the good things it's done. That is an unbelievable. I mean, you basically made a titanium bathtub, attached everything explosive you possibly could to this thing, got it to fly, and just used it as a ground support plane. That's unbelievable.
Well, I'm happy that the A-10 was around. It's one of the reasons I'm still drawing breath to this day. In the first Gulf War, the divisions we ran through after we got through the Republican Guard and got to the second echelon, wasn't much left. They were just wiped out by A-10s. Just, I mean, absolutely destroyed by A-10s. They were amazing. One of our best friends. We absolutely love the A-10. No complaints about that. That was an amazing aircraft. But I got to ask you this question. So listen. So you got to fly in a C-130. You got to sit in a Gripen. What is this? Are you tied to the Guptas in some way? How do you get this personalized South African Air Force transport? What's going on there? You don't have to answer the question. I don't want to start, an investigation here.
No, it was years ago. It was UJ Wits and University of Pretoria Aeronautics Society trip. And I don't know how they managed to arrange it, but it was just like a whole bunch of us kids. They flew down. So whatever, and they let us walk around the airbase there down at Overberg, and obviously under tight guard. It was a very, very lucky trip we got to take. This was years ago though, so I don't think they could or would ever arrange anything like that again. So yeah.
So Tian Vijay had said the reason you like aviation is because you like giving your money away. And his point being aviation is pricey. He's right about that.
Well, I also play tabletop miniatures. I don't know if any of your viewers have ever heard of Warhammer, but I like table. I used to like table. I don't have time for it anymore. But like tabletop miniature war games, I dug that quite a lot. So, yeah.
Stevie B says, it's me. Sorry, Chris. When I get pissed, I get vindictive. Should I give up YouTube or booze? I would argue you should give up booze. YouTube isn't going to destroy your liver. It might destroy your mind or rot your mind, but it's not going to destroy your liver. Yeah, I see Sonny SZA is in here, and I think he said Dumela earlier. So good to see you there. I think Sonny said...
that guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. What 40K army were 10? I actually, people are gonna hate me for this, but I main Tau, and I also like to play Eldar. So yeah, but I do play some Space Marine armies, Space Wolves and Salamanders. So yeah.
Wow. Cool. So you don't have a pilot's license or anything like that, though, have you? You haven't done pilot training?
I haven't. I should one day when I've got like a wife and kids that just bother me too much. I'm gonna get that pilot's license.
Well, kids, I'll tell you what, you're gonna have to put barriers up. That room you're in looks like the size of a freaking football stadium. There, look at that place. That's a huge room.
It's an angle. It's mostly the angle, but yeah, this is the majority of my house. It's living room and kitchen place. The bedrooms to either side aren't that large, but there's a nice balcony. So yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was just a wing of Nkandla or what.
No, no, I'm Tswana. I would never get that high up in the ANC. They would never let the Tswana people that high in the ANC. It's
frankly, I was surprised they let a Zulu get that high up, but then he knew where all the bodies were buried because he ran the intelligence services for MK, so that probably explains how that happened.
Yeah, yeah. So, although, actually, while we're here, I did want to ask you, because in terms of Civil War, so my favorite Union generals are Ulysses Grant and William Sherman, and I know that Sherman's March to the Sea, which is why they called him Burn-in Sherman, is a very sort of how do I put this controversial military move. I wondered if you had any particular thoughts on that.
Well, I do, but I'll share my favorite generals as well. My two favorite Union generals are both cavalrymen, and that's Philip Sheridan, and then the other is John Buford, who is, of course, at Gettysburg. So I think both of those are amazing men. Buford didn't survive the war, but Sheridan did, and of course went on to infamy against Native Americans. But that's a different era. It's not the era I'm talking about. But so my views on the Sherman's March to the Sea. Well, he got orders to break the Confederacy's back, and he did. It was effective. It was brutal. It was total warfare, and something that the world hadn't really seen very often since the Middle Ages.
Exactly.
And it was modern total warfare, and it kind of introduced that. But if it hadn't been Sherman, it would have been somebody else on some other battlefield somewhere. It just would have happened. So I'm not from the South, although I'm from a border state, Maryland originally, but not from the South, so I don't have particularly strong feelings on it. But it's interesting because my father, when I was a kid, would always be like, yes, and a Confederacy, the Confederate States, and Confederate pride and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so I just assumed that we had Confederate ancestors. Well, as a family historian and genealogist, I actually researched, and of the 8 great-great-grandfathers that were alive during the Civil War of mine, 7 of them served in uniform. Every single one in a Union regiment.
So that's a weird preference. I mean, look, as you said, if it wasn't Sherman, it would have been someone else. I think in the grand scheme of things, they had to bring that war to a close. I mean, as you know, it's probably America's bloodiest war to date still, and
It is.
we had to bring the war to an end. It just, I mean, look, it was going to end anyway, in my opinion, because despite having, arguably, I still don't really buy the argument that the Confederates had more talented generals. I don't
No.
think they were all that talented at all, but uh, uh, despite having arguably more talented generals, the North had plenty talented generals, and they had mechanized warfare in the form of, railroads and all that sort of supplies. They had the logistics advantage. It was a matter of time.
No, absolutely, and I think the difference for this which is a myth. Okay, first off, people like Longstreet and Stonewall Jackson. It wasn't like they were generals in the Union Army. They were lieutenants and captains, with some experience. So they had tactical experience. And early on, the battles that the Confederate armies won were tactical or operational battles at best. They weren't strategic victories. They never won strategic victories. That's why it doesn't exist anymore. And what happened, I think, is that early in the conflict, you could lead with elan, that leader on the horse out there and charging, inspiring people, and you could turn the tide of a battle. And that's what Stonewall Jackson did. That battle turned at Bull Run when he was standing like a stone wall, and it's, look at Jackson over there. And that just gets stupidity. We would call it, I guess, courage in that context, but I call it stupidity in the 21st century. That stupidity of standing up in the middle of gunfire to rally your troops to get them to come back and not fall back. And that kind of elan worked early on. But quickly resources started to overwhelm that. And the second part beyond the resources is that the Union generals became effective at operational warfare, and a few of them in strategic warfare, between resources and cutting the Confederacy up in pieces and then using mass against the Confederacy. So that's eventually came to the fore, I think. The Union had plenty of talented generals. Part of the issue here is the way history was written. Even though the North won the war, there weren't a lot of Union generals who wrote about the experiences. There were some, but there were plenty of Southern narratives, and so that kind of played a role in it. And people always like the underdog. Americans like underdogs, even if they're insurrectionists. No wonder these idiots are running around burning cities, because people like the underdog. But so I think that's part of it. But Maison wants to know if what do you think of a gun-free South Africa?
Oh, it's this ridiculous fucking Twitter account. I hate it to death. Like, I have nothing good to say about that account at all. Their whole thing is that nobody in South Africa should have guns, because, as we all know, the criminals are going to give in their guns. And as we all know, disarmed populations have never been abused by their governments.
No, the Chinese didn't suffer during the Cultural Revolution, 20 million killed. The kulaks, the peasants in the Ukraine, didn't suffer, 20 million killed. Yeah, no, they didn't suffer. In Rwanda, the Tutsi and the Hutus
Exactly.
who were allied didn't suffer, 850,000 butchered with machetes. Yeah, unarmed populace. That's why we have a Second Amendment in this country. I think Nigel asked earlier if you've seen the movie 1917. If you have, what do you think of it?
It's still my to-do list. I hear it's absolutely amazing. Like, they sort of do a lot of wizardry with a sort of one long tracking shot for the whole movie, which I think is just amazing.
Well, Kyle just threw a super sticker at us, 21 Rand. Well, thanks a lot, Kyle. I almost forgot what super chats and super stickers were. 'Cause I don't e-beg, so you don't see them. You forget about them. Thank you so much for Kyle. He's just giving us a thumbs up. I think he's enjoying the conversation. Let's see what else we can get to here before we wrap up. Let's see. If this dude can speak Afrikaans. Yeah, you can speak Afrikaans. Throw some Afrikaans at him.
Natuurlijk kan dit praat. Ik woon in Pretoria.
Oh, come on, dude. I can say that.
What?
Just teasing.
Yeah. Oh, one more military thing. I got to say a shout out to the Botswana that served at Battle of Monte Cristo, which we call Marumong, which is it translates to like a slog or a morass or a slaughterhouse or a hard place. But contextually, what it actually means is the place of bullets. That's what it means in Tswana culture.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So let's come back to that just before we wrap up for the day very quickly. So back to the Tswana and the Setswana. We talked a little bit about how the languages are evolving and there's changes over the borders, that sort of thing. But I mean, the basic stuff, your age cohort and the tie to cattle and the land, I mean, that still remains consistent on both sides of the border. I mean, that's a pretty common thing. And totems, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, depending on what clan you're from. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hold that up and then hand it off to the side so it goes over to me so I can take my cultural appropriation right through the camera here? Is that a skull behind you on a bench over there? You're not like a serial killer. Are you a serial killer?
No, that's my Memento Mori skull. I'm really quite into Stoicism, so that's a little Halloween decoration that I have. And it's got the words "Memento Mori," remember death, carved into it. It's just a reminder, I really enjoy a lot of Stoicism. I read, I finally finished the Meditations by the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and it's really interesting stuff.
Cool beans. Well, folks, listen. My guest today has been Odin Moja, who is a Tswana-speaking South African from Northwest, but lives in Gauteng in Pretoria, and he's a computer programmer, a PhD candidate, a military history buff, and an aviation buff. And I found the conversation fascinating. I got the impression most people did. It seems like you enjoyed it as well, Odin. What do you think?
I loved it. I'd love to come on again, and I'd love to have you on my show sometime.
Oh, no, we've actually got to do that. But I will come on your program as Loki, okay?
Oh, God.
Yeah. Anyway, so listen, is there anything that you'd like to leave us with or any thoughts? I didn't know you had a podcast. I really feel bad about that. But we'll share that in the comments after the video so you guys can go check out his podcast. But anything you'd like to share us? You and I talked beforehand. We said we're going to talk about race in South Africa. We never even got around to it. See, that's the thing. Reasonable, cogent people who care about treating people fairly don't care about that nonsense. We haven't really talked about it other than a joking sense about a few things. But maybe we'll talk about that in a future discussion. Was there anything anything you'd like to share with us now? I'm sorry.
Well, I guess to highlight to sign off, to highlight what you say about race is that it's I wouldn't say it's a uniquely South African thing, but the obvious anti-white racism sentiment that is in South Africa doesn't exist in Botswana.
Oh, God, no. It's not even, no.
So it's not even like if you live in a majority black country, you'll be hated for being white. No, if you live in South Africa, you'll be hated for being white. Botswana is a very majority black country, and there is no anti-white sentiment there.
No, it's actually a good point. I didn't really bring it up. I've talked about it on my streams because there's some white South Africans who are desperate. They're terrified. They want to get out of the country, and then where should they go? And people ask me about Botswana. I said, well, if you can migrate to Botswana or at least go get a place and live there, it's brilliant, especially if you're from Northwest or Gauteng, because it's almost the same. The terrain is similar. The people, the Tswana speakers are across that side. And, in Botswana, if you're a white man with a black woman or a white woman with a black man, nobody cares. Nobody pays attention to that. That's nobody's
Everybody's
business.
Tswana.
Exactly. Kimotswana. That's what everybody says. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you have Afrikaans-speaking Botswana. You have Tswana speakers.
Quite a few.
You have Kalanga. You have the Khoi and the San. Well, not the Khoi, but you have the San, who are called the Basarwa, which is not the nicest term, but the San are called Basarwa. So all of them are Kimotswana. They are Botswana.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it's a completely different world. And for South Africans who've never been to Botswana, you should check it out. Just head up there. You have a completely different vibe. Sit in a cafe or restaurant in Gaborone or Francistown, and it feels very different. Even though it's the same sort of physical environment that you find in South Africa, it feels very different, just the atmosphere. Would you agree with that, Odin?
100%, yeah.
There's a very South African phrase right there. 100%. you guys kill me with that one. I love it. That's always a 100%. Anyway, okay. Well, you've been a fantastic guest, Odin. We'll get you back on here, and I'll be happy to come into your program. We'll just talk about it afterwards. Let me get you to stay on the line, okay? And I'm just a little housekeeping. All right, I'll call you back. Can I call you back shortly? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, that way you don't have to hold your mic because you're mixing drinks back there. Somebody think I got a bar going here or something. So anyway, folks, can we get a little applause for those who are still with us? Because I know people said we're taking off, and a lot of people took off to save data, I guess. But can we get a little applause over here for our guests? Just a little clap over there in the chat. Appreciate it. And we thank Odin for being our guest today. It's been a very fascinating discussion. And for what is today, Tuesday or Wednesday? I'm lost on the days.
Wednesday.
Yeah, for midweek, we had a pretty good crowd in here. I think people were fascinated with the discussion of languages. Although I did take a little offense at being called ancient because of basic, but I guess that's what I get for bringing up basic. But that's on me. So we're getting. That's all my fault. Oh, it's my Sunday. Okay, I guess you say Hosiami and Boroko. Okay, so
Hey,
yeah.
I don't know who Sunny ZA is, but that's pretty good Tswana.
Well, no,
Tswana Sintle.
I think Sonny's SZA is actually a Tswana speaker, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Tswana Sintle. Yeah.
Oh, he's Hungarian. Okay, I was wrong. My bad. That's right. I forgot. He was Hungarian. Dogbreaker, where did you come from, man? You just popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So he's Hungarian. Okay. Well, there's Hungarians all over. Tony Nagy's Hungarian. Tony Nagy has got Hungarian relatives, South African relatives. He grew up there, and he lives in Canada. So that guy confused me, just like Joe Emilio. I don't know what he is. Anyway. All right. All right. So I'll give you a salute since you're a military history buff. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being on the program. I'm going to drop you off right here, folks. Thanks a lot so much for being on the program, Odin. We'll catch you a little bit later.
Cool.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me just hang up on Odin, and I'll finish up the show, and I'll call you right back in a minute, Odin.
Cheers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching today's special feature live stream with my guest, Odin Moja, who is a Tswana-speaking South African, who's a computer programmer working on his PhD in interesting medical data field. So I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation, a good little conversation on midweek. I may or may not do a live stream, my straight voltage later on. I'm still debating that because I think the 3ME Bros are coming on, and I'm going to want to watch that. I don't know if I want to go on or before or after that. But if I do go on later, it'll just be for an hour at most. Really do it for just an hour. So thank you all for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. Kyle, thank you for the super chat, or super sticker, I should say, with the little thumbs up. Appreciate that so much. And we've got more guests coming up. I don't have a Saturday guest set as of yet, but I'm working on that. And I will have Major General Yost coming on next Saturday, the 4th of July. So he'll be my guest on here. We're talking about wildlife and parks and briefly touching on his military service in the South African Defense Force and the South African National Defense Force, as well as his working in private sector and industry. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We need to talk about the budget, 1652 to 1920. Tion. Yeah, okay, well then I guess what? I will do a live stream a little bit later. We'll do that. Oh gosh, that would be like a little over an hour from now. So I'll come on in an hour for those who can come back. It'll be at 21:30 South Africa and Botswana time. 21:35. I'll do a stream and we'll talk about the budget and we'll talk about how Jan van Riebeck is off the hook. It's now all King George's fault. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you later on. God bless. Look for you in just a little over